strong.
Chapter 361, The Continuous Bell. At the moment when Ye Fusion's body descended, above the owl's shadow, an evil spirit came over to him, instantly drowning Ye Fusion's entire body in darkness. Strands of powerful evil thoughts rushed straight into Ye Fusion's mind. Ye Fusion's body trembled, and a powerful empire was about to erupt, shielding the will, while the sound of the piano continued, and his fingers frantically moved the strings to communicate. Will in Tianshan. The emperor's golden light trembled, and the snowflakes on Tianshan mountain flowed towards him. His sensitivity spread wildly, and the imperial intent and artistic conception on Tianshan mountain combined to resist the invasion of the evil spirit. Explosion. In his mind, it seems that there is a real demon bird, which covers the sky and covers the sun, able to devour the heavens and the earth. Without the sky, its eyes are narrowed, and its dark wings are stretched out like a doomsday. Although the demon bird died and the will remained, the two emperors abandoned the immortal will and suppressed the evil spirit of the demon bird, but even so, the evil will in Tianshan can still affect an area of thousands of miles, making very few strong people practice in Shucheng. You can imagine how scared the magic bird during its prime. Ye Fusion is now at the center of the magical bird will. If it is not protected by the will of the empire, I am afraid that it will be swallowed up and occupied. Dark air enveloped Ye Fusion's body. Although the will of the fowl was terrifying, when the two emperors and the fowl struggled to suppress it, Ye Fusion guessed that he was still at the sage level. The unification of the world was earlier than more than 300 years ago. Therefore, the imperial will is a higher level of will than the magic bird's will. Although it is rare, it still protects Ye Fusion's will from being swallowed. In his mind, there is an emperor's light guarding him. At this moment, Ye Fusion was steadfast in his will, his gaze fixed on the black wind statue in the darkness in front of him. His entire body was wrapped in black ribbon. Ye Fusion didn't want to see him completely swallowed up and reduced to a magic bird position to another killer demon lord. The only way was to communicate Tianshan's will to suppress the magic bird's will, and at the same time he implanted a stronger imperial will into the black wind carving's will, so that he could match the magic bird's will. Ye Fusion was under terrible pressure, and the demon bird that covered the sky rushed into his mind frantically with hell in the sky. He completely surrounded his spiritual will, and slammed hard. Ye Fusion appeared a stream of dark air, just feeling hard to support. The emperor's tactics spurred his body, then his blood burned, and the dazzling brilliance was shaken and rushed towards Tianshan. This was the second time that he had burned his own limits on Tianshan mountain, and this time the risk was greater than the last time he could confirm that King Li was killed, but this time, he could no longer guarantee that he could defeat the magic bird. Will. Tianshan is very suitable for him, as if to prepare him, let him inherit this Tianshan tone and will. He was still willing to believe that he could defeat the will of the magic bird. Because the two emperors are able to suppress the magic birds, tonight, he has the emperor's intention and can communicate the two emperors' intentions to stay in Tianshan. How could he fail? Moreover, when he and King Li fought, they were in the state of law, and now they are in heaven. The harmony of meaning in heaven and earth, the radiance of the golden emperor's glory vibrates upward, and the divine spirit accompanies the sound of the piano, heading towards Tianshan, constantly merging with the meaning of Tianshan. The meaning of the two emperors has been integrated into Tianshan, as if it is part of Tianshan. He can definitely do it. Kinyan's voice spreads continuously in the Tianshan mountains, the snowflakes seem to listen to the tone, and then dance to the tune to resonate. What sound? At this time, there are still people on Tianshan mountain who have not descended. He stood on the mountain and suddenly heard the song, stopped, and they felt calm. This song is everywhere, integrated into the falling snow, and into their perception. Curious. Many people were amazed, they stopped and stared at the snow in the Tianshan mountains. Music hidden in the snow. Who's playing? Or the will left by the two emperors revived. This piano sound. Many people were intoxicated by it, infected by the sound of the piano, their legs did not move, and they felt still. Kinyan is still spreading to the Tianshan mountains. At this moment, Ye Fusion's heart was indifferent. He felt like he was slightly integrated into the Tianshan mountains and became a part of it. The place he felt was getting further and further away. As time passed, Ye Fusion was under a terrible pressure, but as the sound of the piano continued to sound, Tianshan's will seemed to fuse with him, resisting the evil spirit and reducing its pressure. After a long time, Ye Fusion's mind shuddered, and the entire Tianshan mountain had a beautiful scene. He only felt that his wish had become extremely overbearing. The Golden Emperor's intent was completely integrated into the Tianshan mountains. Ye Fuxian felt as if he was standing on Tianshan Mountain. This feeling is extraordinary. It was as if this Tianshan Mountain had become a part of him. That meaning is the meaning of Tianshan Mountain. As soon as the thoughts moved, the snow in Tianshan moved, and the endless aura rod, and the bell method was gradually formed. Clang. Along with Ye Fuxian's thoughts, the far bell sounded, a terrifying power penetrated into it, rushed to Tianshan Mountain, suppressed, and made a loud noise, and the shadow of a huge and boundless owl seemed to be scattered. The evil intent in Ye Fuxian's mind was instantly expelled. The black wind eagle's body shivered fiercely, and the demon breath in his body trembled a lot, but he vomited blood, his eyes suddenly opened, staring at Ye Fuxian, very cold. It was not the black wind eagle eyes, but the magical bird eyes. On Tianshan Mountain, when the bell rang, many people groaned and looked pale, although their cultivation was not high. When the bell rang, the pressure soared and their desires were shaken. At the foot of the mountain, after a few days, the bells came out again on Tianshan Mountain. An extremely terrifying invisible sound wave swept and flashed. In an instant, many people closed their eyes, only feeling the storm from shaved on the body, especially those who became strong. They just felt like they were about to be crushed. The bell rings again. Many people trembled, and no one yet knew why the bell in Tianshan rang. Dang. This time, it wasn't just a bell. When the second bell rang, several prince figures vomited blood, their faces were extremely ugly, and some powerful practitioners were attacked more seriously. Which bastard did it? At the location of the hut, Jujui's mouth was bleeding, and he shouted at Tianshan, and his beautiful eyes showed a very unpleasant expression. He seemed to feel a huge law bell, which melted into Tianshan. Beside Hua Kunking, Mrs. Yusio and Lu Nanshan also looked pale, but when they saw Hua Kunking looking up at the peak of Tianshan Mountain, the bell rang continuously. He knew, however, that Ye Fuxian, now at the peak of the Tianshan Mountains, was playing the piano left by the emperor. Clang. Another bell rang, and many people lost their temper completely. Zhu Jime glanced at Tianshan angrily, then turned to leave. Go. Someone said one after another, and then one after another the powerful figures left here. Whether it was a strong person in Kotang Academy or a strong person in the Qing dynasty, they left one by one. Here the bells that rang continuously swept into the distance, reached Shucheng, and spread to more distant places, and in the east and west of the desert, many people looked towards Tianshan. Is this the emperor's voice? Of course, no one knew that the person who rang the bell was not the emperor, but was playing because of Ye Fuxian. If Zhu Hui finds out, I don't know if he will pull out the whip on his belt. 3 bells in a row, the vibration of the vibration is shaking, and the virtual image of the demon bird is unstable, but the black wind eagle is also suffering greatly and continues to cough up blood, but the eyes have already seen the light of evil. Little eagle, are you still there? Ye Fuxian shouted. He stopped and continued, if the black wind eagle will be killed by him, and the life soul appears, a terrible spirit storm blooms, turning into a terrible storm. Tianshan's will is crazy about this mental storm among them. Qingyan also followed, and then rushed to the black wind eagle. He had to go in and see. The little eagle is still not the previous one. The spirit storm entered the will of the black wind eagle. He saw in the endless darkness, but Ye Fuxian did not surrender. The bright will rush into the dark vortex, and then he finally feels the existence of his own empire, buried in it, but not destroyed. The emperor, that is, the other party, cannot be destroyed. Little eagle, Ye Fuxian shouted. In the imperial will, a very weak will appeared, and then Ye Fuxian felt the existence of a black wind carving. Oh! A voice came out. Ye Fuxian was very surprised and alive. I will put the will of the empire into your will to help you fight this power. Ye Fuxian exchanged thoughts with the black wind carving. By releasing the soul of life, the bright empire will continue to instill the meaning of Tianshan to black. In the mind of the wind eagle, guarding the will of the other party, fused with the will of the black wind eagle. Until now, Ye Fuxian only retreated, his soul disappeared, and the evil spirit invaded again, covering the black wind carving. Ye Fuxian stared at black wind carving, watching his every move. At this moment, the thought of black wind carving came from his mind, giving him a strange look. Okay, then you have to be careful. Ye Fuxian replied, then flashed out of the hallway, and immediately returned to Tianshan. Fei Zhu was still there. Ye Fuxian breathed a stale air, and glanced at the rest of his life lying there. Finally, a smile appeared in his eyes, as if relieved, and his body fell again. In the Tianshan Mountains, the black wind vulture was still standing there. The light of darkness once again engulfed his body and attacked the evil spirit. His body was once again covered by darkness. However, this time the eyes of the black wind vultures were extremely sharp. Then close your eyes and endure all this in peace. Chapter 362, Qin Wang. The strong people of all the top forces in Tianshan have withdrawn from Tianshan. At the feet of Tianshan, there are still endless numbers, but they are all under the princely realm, and there are fewer top powers. Someone descended from Tianshan mountain. Gradually, the people at the foot of the mountain also left here. After trying, it became clear that even if the bell of Tianshan mountain was really summoned by the emperor, it would be missed by them. Of course, there are still many people who don't want to leave, especially those in the eastern wasteland and the western region. This towering Tianshan mountain is a sacred place in the western region. As time goes by, there are several legends at the foot of Tianshan mountain. According to the people who descended from Tianshan mountain, the sound of harps and melodies can be heard in the blizzard, which is the mood that the emperor once played on Tianshan mountain and merged into Tianshan mountain. It is also said that the Tianshan bell and the Tianshan sound are because the Donghang emperor longs for Ye Qingdi, who is at the alternation of life and death together, so that his intention is to find endless time and space, affecting Tianshan, and there is a bell. Ring. The legend of the two emperors had begun to spread. Many people still don't understand why Emperor Ye King is ruthless, and why did the Eastern Phoenix Emperor order the destruction of Ye Kang's emperor statue in the world because of the emperor. Unfortunately, the world's best friends who once joined the world together ended because the power went to the opposite side and ended in the death of one party, but even if Emperor Ye King failed, Emperor Donghang would have to miss him. Someone at the foot of the mountain. Chatting. I don't know what kind of character the two emperors were. I hate that they weren't born in that era to witness their legends. Several youths laughed, and how much the situation of the two emperors ruled the world. Nature is one with the heart. At this moment, a relaxed voice came. The chattering people turned their eyes and saw the snow. A tattered old man walked to the side, and a hip flask hung on his body. Looking towards the peak of Tianshan mountain, there was something extraordinary. Why did the old man say that? The young man smiled. How can you be the co-owner of a heartless world? The old man said lightly. I don't believe it. A young man in a blue suit shook his fan with a smile, and said with a smile, the rules of the world are made by the strong, and they can unify the world, naturally they have absolute power. The so-called heart is too hypocritical, more than that besides, if that is the case, why is Ye Qingdi taboo? The old man smiled and shook his head without arguing with the young man. Father, you have come here too, you made me easy to find. At this time, a girl in a green dress came in the white snow and was very happy to see the old man. Girl, you and I have run out of fate, you don't need to find me later. The old man smiled and shook his head when he saw the green skirt girl. Gods and gods, I can't believe what I've done, I will follow you, sir, don't try to leave me. The girl said calmly, you can rest easy, I will make you delicious every day. The old man shook his head, my fifth family cooks very well. I haven't tasted it for a long time. I will come back. The girl's beautiful eyes stagnate, and then she looked a little confused. You are going home, old man. The old man was lazy and wandering, he always thought that the old man had no home. The old man nodded with a smile. Then I'll go over to your house as a guest. I can also help you keep your body suppressed. The girl smiled. My sixth girl is also an adult, very well behaved. Although the second girl is more naughty, it should be no problem to help the old man suppress the bones of the body. The old man smiled, and the girl glared at him. This old man is so capable. Ah, your sixth. Your sister is very worried, your second and sixth girls must not look good to me, the girl stared. My second girl looks very good. People in the East Wasteland must see that she doesn't look bad, and my sixth girl is much prettier than you. The old man thought of the two girls with a smile. Then why don't you go home forever? The girl pouted, slightly disbelieving. The old man looked at Tianshan and smiled, wait for someone I might want to wait for. This seems to be a bit dumbfounded, and the girl doesn't understand it. She looks at Tianshan and waits for one, maybe the person she wants to wait for, and who is she waiting for? The young man next to him had been listening to the conversation between the two. He looked at the old man in surprise, and couldn't help but utter a voice, this old man is sick. The girl blinked and said that it was a matter of the heart. Today this old man is a god, what nonsense is spoken, and I don't know which one is wrong. The old man stared blankly at the young man, shook his head randomly and depressed, he was sick. Young people now. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. The 1033-year Shungshu calendar is coming to an end. This year, many great events took place in the Eastern Wasteland. From the first day of the new year, the Qin dynasty and Donghazong married and founded the East Qin Academy. Jiyu Donglu defeated Lu Nanshan. Then Ye Fusion was killed, and the Qin dynasty officially started the road to rejuvenation. East Rasteland set off a storm in this year. The ultimate battle almost broke out at the foot of Tianshan mountain. Kotang's second disciple was strong enough to destroy King Yu's prestige, only then was the Qin dynasty and other forces blocked again, otherwise Donghang didn't know how many people would die. However, everyone in the eastern wasteland felt that this would definitely be a troubling year. Sooner or later, the storm that had engulfed the eastern wasteland would erupt. King Li's death was definitely a clue. King Yu returns to the Qin dynasty and meets the King of Qin. At this time, in the palace of the King of Qin is sitting fishing in front of the lake in the palace, and quietly listening to King Yu's words. The King's face did not have many waves. In fact, he knew better than King Yu about King Yu's death. Previously, however, he was in the Qin palace. During the trip to Tianshan, he died of a daughter and a grandson. King Mengruo and King Li and King Yuan are different. King Yuan is the son of his sister-in-law. His talent turned into humorous art. He lost his face, but he still had a stingy feeling for the throne. It was just ridiculous, but it was only because of his concubine love. There are some seductive aspects, and she continues to pretend to spoil her youngest son. After all, practitioners sometimes have to have fun. In fact, among his many children, King Yuan was the one he disliked the most, and even he hated him. And if King Meng was his youngest daughter, one of the three beauties in Donghanging, he had always doted on her and let her marry Dong Hazong for the same purpose. He thought he owed his young daughter something. King Li was his favorite grandson. There is also King Ji, who is also very kind among his children. They all died from that hut. I did a lot for the cottage in the Qin dynasty, but it seems that we always suffer. It has always been us. Now, both Mengruo and Liar are dead. King Wang said. His voice was calm, but there was a secret in the calm. Cold. The Qin dynasty's destruction of the Liu kingdom completely hindered all the troops in the eastern wasteland, but as for the cottage, they never took any advantage. Although disciple Kotang's strength is somewhat unexpected, it seems that he should be able to defeat you. After all, he is above Jiu Dongyu. If he also had a sage weapon, he would naturally defeat you, but I didn't expect you to lose so pitifully. King continued, of course, you must understand that the person we truly fear was never Kotang's second disciple, nor was he a sword sage. King Yu listened quietly to the surroundings. His father and king gave him the title of prince. From then on, the Qin dynasty was in control. His father and king did not finish the Qin dynasty and everything was handled by him. But he naturally understood that his father was the real pillar of the Qin dynasty. There are many people in the world who say that Master Du Duo doesn't understand the practice, but how can someone who doesn't understand the practice teach such a group of disciples, and these disciples are so obedient, do you believe it? King Wang glanced at King Yu, he smiled and shook his head, as if he was mocking something. Besides, he is still a character who can't find everything, and we haven't tried it for many years. I think, Master Kotang Du is not only very strong, but also very good at hiding, or disguise. Surgery, even if he stands in front you, you probably don't even know who he is. King Wang sighed, there is such an opponent, and he still watches everything secretly. He didn't do it. How can I do it? But Ziyu has died a lot so far, not to mention the temptation. Master Du has never seen it before. Kotang disciples let us burn our heads. King Wang shook his head with ridicule, but finally there is also good news. What news? King Yu asked, and he did not see the good news. Every time, the thatched hut showed unparalleled strength, blocking everything, the appearance of the sword sage, King Ja's death, and the outbreak of the second disciple of the thatched hut. Every time the thatched hut told us not to act rashly, but the coincidence reminded us, the thatched cottage also has concerns. It seems that Master Du is invincible. The king smiled, and there was wisdom in his eyes to understand everything, like an ancient calculation. After that, he calmed his voice and said coldly, you went to invite Hua Zongju to the Qin dynasty, and then traveled to Fuyun Janzong and Zuawang Hall. Now that I have set foot on Qin dynasty's boat, I still want to touch the fish in the waters. Muddy. Is it possible? With a sneer in his eyes, sometimes when you stand up, things are bound to change. Fuyun Janzong and Zuawang Palace had no choice. Okay. King Yu's eyes flashed a sharp money. It looks like the father is going to make a big move this time. The death of the younger sister-in-law may be the father king, and I can't stand it. Ye Fusion is a person in the land of hundreds of countries. According to King Li, there are still some fellow comrades there, shouldn't he? King Yu's expression flashed coldly. It's just a trace. King shook his head, destroy the Willow Kingdom to prove the majesty of the dynasty. What's the point of killing those people other than exporting bad gas? And Li Ye was killed by Ye Fuxian in the battle, then killed him. You must remember that you will be the king of Qin, the king of the Eastern Wasteland. There are some things you shouldn't be ashamed of. Don't make people laugh. I understand. Qin Yu nodded, then stepped back and left here. Chapter 363, Swordsman. The turmoil in the Tianshan Mountains had not subsided. On the other side of the Qin dynasty, the lord of the Dongba sect descended on the Qin palace. It is said that it was invited by the king of Qin. These are two of the three peak powers in the Eastern Wasteland. The meeting of two giants naturally had a great meaning. Especially in this sensitive period, the people of the Eastern Wasteland should think more. I am afraid that there is only one thing that the two giants can meet to discuss and unite the great cause of the East. Then, they invited the strong people from Fuyun Janzong and the suspended king palace to go there. There was strong news that the Qin dynasty's ancestors opened their tombs and let the peak figures of several powerful forces enter. When this news came out, many people were vaguely aware that a real storm might come at any moment. A few months ago, the Qin dynasty invited the troops from the Eastern Wasteland to hold a grand event, and the Blade Saint came to surprise the crowd, but now, it seems a bit overwhelming. However, this is also normal. Fuyun Janzong and Zuawangdian had already stated their position a few months ago. They can only follow the Qin dynasty and not retreat. In the Qin palace, many people in front of Qin Yu came to report. He hasn't come down yet. Qin Yu asked coldly. Not. The priest shook his head. Even though the people of the Peak army were evacuated, how could Qin Yu endure Qin Li's death? He still sent some strong people under the princely realm to guard the foot of Tianshan mountain, waiting for Ye Fuxian to appear. But Ye Fuxian didn't even get to Tianshan. It was also possible that he came down from the other side of Tianshan and avoided it on purpose. Tianshan is too big for his people to surround the entire Tianshan. Donghazong people believe that Chu Chu had a chance to kill Ye Fuxian at that time. Qin Yu asked with cold eyes. Okay, according to them, Ye Fuxian has lost his fighting power at that time. Chu Yu is there. The person in front of him answered. Qin Yu held his palm and looked extremely cold. What is Chu Yan's identity? Qin Li's girlfriend. Where can he kill Ye Fuxian? Not kill. Did he see his son Qin Li killed? Did Chu Chu go down the mountain? Qin Yu asked. The people who followed Wezong returned to Zongmen. Qin Yu nodded, with a cold expression on his face. Chu Yan and Wang Wezong, see if they don't know anything else, otherwise he doesn't mind killing one more force. His son Qin Li would not die in vain. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. The end of the Shungshu calendar is 10.303, and it is getting closer to the end of the year. Fuyun Sword Sect, Sovereign Ha Ruoshui returned to the gate. The first peak of the Fuyun Sword Sect, Ha Ruoshui had a sword in his hand, and the sword body showed a chill. He looked at the sword, and there was a shadow on the sword. Look at his sharp eyes. This is the famous sword of many years ago. The name of the sword is Shaking, the famous sword used by the first swordsman in Donghang hundreds of years ago. I didn't expect to be collected in the Qin dynasty tomb. Today, it is his. The Qin dynasty wanted to revive the eastern region. He had already promised something to the Qin dynasty. He didn't promise a knot. He had no choice. Brother. The swords shouted at each other, landed on top of Janfeng, and looked at Ha Ruoshui. Isn't he coming? Ha Ruoshui asked. Fuyun Janzong has 7 peaks, but only 6 people are present. The person who did not come was naturally the 7th peak of Lord Fengun, the solitary city. People don't talk. For a long time, Ha Ruoshui, the master of the Fuyun sword, and the lone city of the 7th peak, were the two strongest people in the Fuyun sword, but the solitary city was more lonely and pure. Since the Ye Wuchen incident, the relationship between the two peaks has become more refined, especially Ha Ruoquan's underwater orders expel Ye Wuchen from the Floating Cloud Sword sect, and said that he can kill and clear the portal. In this regard, the peak of the 7 major lonely cities is very dissatisfied. It seems that his heart is no longer in Janzong, Ha Ruoshui said coldly. As he spoke, in the distance, at the 7th peak of Fuyun Janzong, an extremely sharp sword intent suddenly bloomed. This sword intent trembled and wanted to destroy everything. Fuyun Janzong, countless eyes looked in that direction, and then saw a figure walking in the void, straight to Zhang Wang. That is Master Kifeng. The countless disciples of Yunjun Janzong's heart shake. What is Master Kifeng Feng doing? Ha Ruoshui and others glanced, looked over there, frowning slightly, displeased. Looking in that direction, the figure standing in the void waved his palm, and suddenly a sword light flew towards the 7th peak. What's that? It's a sword post. Someone shook his mouth. His heart trembled, the sword light moved forward along the void, reached the first peak, and headed for the supreme Ha Ruoshui. Ha Ruoshui stretched out her fingers and squeezed it. She looked indifferent and looked at the deserted city. Fuyun Janzong, the seventh peak of the lonely city, challenges Ha Yanshui, the master of the Fuyun sword. A voice sounded through the Fuyun sword sect. At this time, the people of the Fuyun sect trembled, even though they knew the Kifing master and the lord. Disagreement, but did not expect to reach such a point. The challenge of disciplining the disciples is my Fuyun Janzong's rule, and you challenge me, this is the following offense. Ha Ruoshui said coldly, give me a reason. Repair merchant, don't break your brows and bend my waist. As the god of the cloud sword, you are favored by the Qin dynasty. If you want to follow the Qin dynasty, you are not worthy of a sword repair, much less the lord of the sword goddess. Janzong Kifing echoed. Ha Ruoshui sneered, saying, I am the cloud sovereign sword master. When I protect the sovereign sword, I am in danger. When the sword is too stiff, the sword breaks. Instead of bending over. Gucheng said faintly, my disciple Ye Wuchen killed Qin Yuan. It was Qin Yuan as a concubine, and the Fuyun sword sect was worse than others. You expelled Ye Wuchen from the sect for the Yunjian Bofu sect. Yes, you sent someone to bringing Ye Wu dust is fine, but now, as you go further and further, if you become a running dog for others, it is better to flee from the sword sect from then on. The sword repairman has a sword in his heart. If there is Janfeng, it will be Janzong. I have announced the disbandment of the 7th peak Fuyun Janzong. Get out of position, don't seek his wisdom. Ha Ruoshui stepped forward, her voice whistling. Different ways are not the same. I won. I will disband Fuyun Janzong. You win, I die. Gucheng also took the same step. 2 straight swords headed towards the center. Fuyun Janzong looked countless. The heart is very restless. Today, the 2 strongest men in Fuyun Janzong, but because of different ideas, experienced a deadly battle. In the sky above the Fuyun sword sect, a terrible sword storm was born. The 2 of them stood opposite each other but did not face each other directly, so they stood on the void, but even if they stood there, a sword that destroyed everything birth, suppressed from the sky, feeling this sword, many people only felt like their bodies were torn apart. Their bodies stood still, but they seemed to have faced each other many times, looking at each other with dignity. Although the 2 of them didn't move, in their eyes, they seemed to have the shadow of the sky. Finally, 2 shadows appeared in the sky, towards each other. The 2 shadows behind flashed and disappeared in an instant. The 2 men above the floating cloud sword sect were still standing there as if they had never moved, but at this moment, in the midst of them, an extremely terrifying sword that emanated from the sky down below, it turned into light that hit the mountain peak. At Fuyun Janzong, instantly, the mountain peak flashed a bright light, and a sword mark appeared in the center. This light directly broke the mountain peak. The people on each peak looked at the mountain peaks, and the sword light in the middle remained for a long time, as if they would exist forever, raised their heads, and looked at the 2 facing each other. Someone noticed that Ha Ruoshui, the master of the Fuyun sword, shook his arm, and a stream of blood ran down his arm, flowing over the famous sword that reflected a cold light. You were defeated, Ha Ruoshui began. Ji Yucheng glanced at the sword in Ha Ruoshui's hand, and sighed, I wasn't defeated, you really don't deserve to be the master of the sword. The words fell, and the Lingshan sword exploded into his body, overflowing from every part of his body. Then, people saw that Gucheng's body was crushed directly, and the sword light shook, like lightning flashed in the sky and left. Are you dead? Everyone sighed. What is it departing Zhang Wang? Ha Ruoshui glanced into the distance. He didn't catch up, turned around, and walked quietly towards the practice house from the first peak. The blood of his arms continued to flow downwards, dripping from the void. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. Tianshan, mountainside. Several figures practiced in the snow. Ye Wuchen sat cross-legged, swords wrapped around him, and Liu Shenyu and Liu Feiyang were at his side. Just then, Ye Wuchen suddenly opened his eyes and looked into the distance. What is it? Feeling Ye Wuchen's abnormal breathing, Liu Shenyu's beautiful eyes whispered to him. The sword heart is unstable, as if something is calling to approach me, I have a bad feeling. Ye Wuchen said softly. Don't think about it, Liu Shenyu suggested. Ye Wuchen looked at him, stroked Ye Wuchen's hair with his right hand, and said, yes. Why didn't that person go down the mountain? Ye Shaoxi went up the hill to find someone, but he didn't see him, and he didn't know if he could find him. Liu Feiyang at the side spoke and Ye Wuchen looked at Tianshan, he felt a bit faint. Ye Fusion might have reached the top of the mountain. Don't worry, wait. Ye Wuchen stood up and stepped on Baishu. He walked to the cliff and looked off into the distance, restless. The feeling gradually became stronger and stronger. In the distance of Tianshan, a dazzling sword light came in the endless void, advanced at a very fast speed, and rushed to Tianshan. Standing there, Ye Wuchen trembled fiercely, and then he saw a sword light coming straight at him. Careful! Liu Shenyu exclaimed, but Ye Wuchen did not hide. The sword light immediately entered his mind, and for a moment, Ye Wuchen appeared as a terrible sword. No dust. Liu Shenyu's face was dead like that, and he ran towards Ye Wuchen. Liu Feiyang's heart was also shaking violently, but at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from Ye Wuchen's body, dustless, swordsman, not arrogant, impatient, swordman, fearless, swordman, without a change of heart, never moves forward. This voice is the first day of worship of Ye Wuchen. His teacher, the seventh teacher Fenggung Jianzong, spoke to him, and now his voice is heard in Tianshan again. Listening to this voice, tears dripped from the corners of Ye Wuchen's eyes, falling on the white snow. Chapter 364, Pitted. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu stood beside Ye Wuchen. They both heard the voice, only feeling respectful. Swordsman, like that. When Liu Shenyu saw the tears in the corner of Ye Wuchen's eyes, he only felt a slight pain in his heart. He immediately guessed what had happened. The man was crying, but someone like Ye Wuchen couldn't understand. Ye Wuchen's body was surrounded by extremely powerful swords, which made Liu Shenyu want to get close but couldn't. This sword must be handed over to him by his master. The sword flowed into Ye Wuchen's body and turned into a powerful sword airfield. Ye Wuchen closed his eyes and the falling snow was crushed by the sword when he was near him. His body is like a handle. The sword stood in the snow. After a long time, the sword intent on Ye Wuchen disappeared. Liu Feiyang discovered that the temperament on Ye Wuchen had changed again. Sharp meaning seems a little less, more natural, and heaven and earth. Simultaneously, it is a deeper manifestation of nature. The heavenly positions were constantly fused with the heavens and the earth, so that their own power resonated with the power of the heavens and the earth. Raised his head and let Fei Zhu fall on his face. Ye Wuchen did not grieve or even feel sad. Just remembering that he would be the swordsman the teacher wanted to see. At the peak of the Tianshan Mountains, Ye Fusion plays the piano. The rest of his life is practiced in front of him. The sound of the piano is constantly introduced to the eardrums of the rest of life. An extremely violent dark golden airflow resounded with the heavens and earth, and the dark gold magic power buried it all within, becoming more and more terrifying. Explosion. At this moment, the current of fear swept over, the magic rolled, the eyes of the remnant of life opened, the dark light in the pupils gradually disappeared and became normal, and the breath flowing in his body became more and more horizontal. Just like Ye Fusion, all martial arts burst into the sky, and even though he didn't master the spell, his spiritual practice never stopped. Get up. Ye Fusion stopped fingering the strings with his 10 fingers, revealing a smile, like everything on the mountain today has finally been settled. The rest of his life nodded, and he stood up. He looked at Tianshan, and said, "What happened in Tianshan? What song is this? The mood is very strong." Fu Shiku, the two emperors stay. Ye Fusion said, "We have been in Tianshan for a long time, and we don't know how the situation in the eastern wasteland is. It's time to go back." "Okay, how about Xiaodiao?" The rest of his life asked. "It remains in the Tianshan mountains for spiritual practice, which is very beneficial to him." Ye Fusion said, and no longer asked for the rest of his life. Fixu turned into a wind spell, covered the two people's bodies, and then they flew with Fixu straight to Tianshan. Now, with Tianshan's entire look, he can clearly find where his friends are. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. At the foot of Tianshan, although many people have left, too many people are still living here. On the mountain road, there was a group of people walking in the snow at this time. They were distinguished and very young. They attracted the attention of many people. After that, many people spoke and saw a handsome young man standing in the middle. Ye Fusion, come down the mountain. Kotang disciple Ye Fusion killed Qin Li and the Qin dynasty in the Tianshan mountains for the rest of his life. He killed Qin Mengruo, which led to a battle between Qin Yu and Zhu Hui. Now these people have descended to Tianshan. It seems that sister and brother have already left. Ye Fusion looked at the large crowd. They lived in Tianshan for a long time. In addition to the bells he raised at the beginning, perhaps the second and third brothers also suffered. Want to keep it a secret. Among the crowd, an old man sitting in the snow looked at the figures under the mountain. His eyes narrowed, smiling. He was the first to see the little man. The green-clothed girl beside him was still there. Maimo looked at the people, and said, "Are they rumors of thatched huts?" Kotang disciples, in the eyes of many people in the Eastern Wasteland, are definitely legendary characters, especially the top 3 disciples, who have stood at the pinnacle of the Eastern Wasteland. Did you see my temper? The old man stood up and said to the girl. You. The green skirt girl's eyes slightly sneered, and she said, although you have to be an expert, don't talk too much. Don't believe me, you look at the long beautiful girl, it's my family's Liuya, the fat man next to her, who is 7 years old, and the person who looks good in the middle should be 8 years old. The old man pointed at Ye Fusion and their path of humanity. The old man didn't expect your cheeks to be too thick. Listening to what you said, the second girl in your mouth is the second disciple of the thatched cottage, aren't you the legendary thatched cottage do master? The green skirt girl hates. Ahem. The old man patted the snow on his body, his expression became serious, and he said solemnly, Loki, Loki. The young girl in the green skirt blinked and then smiled. Seeing his expression, the old man stared with a beard and didn't even believe him. At this time, I saw the line of people in the crowd headed for Ye Fusion and others, and then faintly blocked them there. Master, you look like people from the Qin dynasty. The green skirt girl looked stoned. If the Qin dynasty left someone here, he would definitely want to kill Ye Fusion. The people who appeared in front of Ye Fusion were people from the Qin dynasty. When they saw them, the Dao Shengshan disciples and their disciples flickered. Obviously, many people are left at the feet of the Tianshan. After all, this is the western region. The closest. If you do, you will definitely not be able to get out of the western region of the eastern wasteland. A swordsman said. The Qin dynasty's eyes flashed and his face was cold. Behind them, 2 figures stepped forward, and he released a terrifying momentum on his body, which was the strongest in the time of the prince. Kill. The 2 walked in the void, headed straight for Ye Fusion, and a terrifying force swept over. Ye Fusion glanced at them, and there was a glint of sharpness in his appearance. At this moment, a terrifying stream of air flowed down Tianshan Mountain. Clang. The bell rang and turned into a rushing wave, and the powerful people of the 2 princely realms stared at Tianshan, as if they felt an invisible law bell, and a bell rang in their bodies. Bum. A terrifying wave shattered their bodies, and the 2 groaned, their bodies fell straight from the void, their faces were pale, and their mouths were bloody. Shit, shit. The bells vibrated constantly in the Tianshan Mountains. The endless vast world seemed to tremble. Countless people closed their eyes and reached out to block their feet. Footsteps were rooted in the ground, but even so, they still received an extremely strong impact, and their hearts skipped a beat. The old man standing in the snow danced in a frantic outfit. At this moment, it seemed that there was a terrifying stream of light in his body, resisting the power, and at the same time he raised his head and looked at Tianshan. Was it a coincidence that the Tianshan bell rang at this time? He naturally couldn't believe it. The 2 princely figures were constantly impacted, and blood was pouring out of their mouths. They only felt that the whole person was shaken slightly numb and their footing was unstable. Before the bell rang in Tianshan, all the princes left, but Qin Yu sent them back to kill Ye Fusion, but they didn't expect it to happen by chance. When they started, the Tianshan bell rang again. Suddenly, when they didn't wake up, they suddenly felt a strong crisis, raised their heads to look ahead, and saw a sword light cut towards them. Clang. The bell rang and swept again, and the 2 legs disappeared, their will seemed to explode, the sword light flashed, and the blood bloomed. The 2 strong men in the princely era stretched out their hands, covered their throats, and opened their eyes, showing unwillingness. How could they die like this? The bell finally stopped, the crowd calmed down, and when they saw the 2 lying on the snow, they both trembled inside. Is this alive? The 2 princes died unexpectedly in this way, and after their deaths, the bell stopped. If it wasn't fate, would someone in Tianshan help their Ye Fusion? This is clearly more impossible. The people of the Qin dynasty walked in front of the bodies of the 2 men, their faces were extremely ugly and ugly. Let's go. Ye Fusion didn't bother starting a war. The people who ignored the Qin dynasty did not dare to stop him anymore. The real killing trick to kill Ye Fusion is for the prince to leave. Ye Fusion walked on the snow, and then saw another figure stopped in front of them. Ye Fusion showed a strange look at this moment. He was standing in front of him by a tattered old man with his hands on his shoulders, his eyes moving towards him. Bi Tang Exinger wanted to step forward, but seeing Li Shaoxi holding her, winked at her. Seeing Li Shaoxi's grinning eyes, Bi Tang Exinger glared at him. This is a little lion. Old man, is something wrong? Ye Fusion asked with a strange look. The old man did not speak, and continued to stare at him. His eyes became brighter and brighter. Ye Fusion had a black line on his face, then lifted his steps and walked away from him. The old man continued to stand in front of him and asked, "Where is your hometown?" "Secluded places are inadequate," Ye Fuxian said. "Is there something wrong with the old man?" "How old is she?" the old man asked again. Ye Fuxian was dark, but still replied, "It's about 20. 20. The old man seemed to think of something, and then smiled at Ye Fuxian. "You worship." Ye Fuxian was completely dumbfounded. Is there a problem with this old man? Sorry, my old man's brain is a little wrong. The girl in the green skirt next to her ran forward, trying to pull the old man up, and the old man's face suddenly darkened. Cough. The old man coughed, looked towards the north. Tang Exinger and Ye Shaoxi, standing there with his head raised, looked like a master. Take good care of the old man, don't let the old man run away. Ye Fuxian laughed at the green skirt girl. This old man is too cute. At this moment, Tang Exinger tugged at his sleeves. What happened to Sister Exinger? Ye Fuxian asked. Tang Exinger looked at him, then stepped forward and said to the old man, "Teacher, how's your father here?" "Teacher, is your old man's body okay? My disciple misses him a lot." Ye Shaoxi dashed forward, slickly. Ye Fuxian blinked and saw the old man smiling at him. Suddenly Ye Fuxian's face became extraordinarily beautiful, which was awkward. Ye Shaoxi, this fat man. Suffering, misery. Chapter 365, Straw Gossip. Donghang City, the capital of God, is very lively at this time. Mr. Thatched Cottage, back to the mountains. Even though the disciples at the academy didn't know Master Du, that didn't prevent the old man who was remote to not know how to train, especially when the top 3 disciples in Kotang were so strong. Maybe someone thought that maybe the luck that Du received disciples was extraordinary. This was indeed true, but why was he able to accept these disciples? Why were the disciples in the lodge willing to follow Master Du willingly? This is enough to make people think. In that year, many people coveted the cottage after Dao Sheng became famous. Later, Jiu Dongyu became famous as the East China Forest. Yishan is like a legend. The people in the academy are curious about that magical place. There was no magic place in the hut, and a group of people went up the mountain, and Zhu Gehui and Jiu Dongyu, who were told, came to greet them. Second brother and third brother. Ye Fuxian shouted with a smile. The two nodded, but they saw that the second teacher's eyes fell on the old man, but the smiling eyes were a little sad at that time. "Teacher, your father, it's been a long time since I walked away, so want to come back." "Earth girl, isn't this afraid that you will miss you?" the old man laughed. Although Ye Fuxian heard how the teacher called his sister on the street, it was really strange to hear the teacher screaming in front of him. "Did you always know I remember? This time back to the mountain, won't you sneak away again?" The second teacher and sister looked at the teacher suspiciously, as if filled with disbelief. "Master, I left with an upright posture." "What slipped?" The old man looked at Jiu Dongyu and said, "Boss, what are you saying?" "That teacher is of course right," Jiu Dongyu nodded solemnly. "Well, the younger one is better with the old man, not like a girl, hey. There is no obedient girl outside." The old man shook his head and sighed, then walked forward with his head raised. "Teacher, don't I think you're afraid you'll leave us alone again?" Zhu Hui stepped forward and took the old man's arm. "About the same," the old man nodded in satisfaction. "What are you looking at? I'm not going to cook the teacher yet." Sister She looked up and saw Luo Ye looking at himself next to Zhu Ye, and couldn't help but groan, and put his hands on his belt. Both of them shivered. Since the return of Tianshan, the second teacher and sister will make a little more movement and touch the belt. This move is quite lethal. "Brother and teacher are waiting, I will cook delicious food for everyone," Luo Fan said cheerfully, running away. Ye Fuxian's eyes turned. The second teacher held his hand like a little girl, and the proud third brother stood quietly beside the teacher. This picture shows the position of the teacher in the cottage. It seems that the future happy life is in the hands of the teacher. Thinking of this, he glanced at Ye Shaoxi next to him, this fat man. The first impression is terrible. I hope the teacher has no opinion. Ye Shaoxi walked forward calmly as if he had not seen her. A group of people came to the hut. Luo Fan and Zhu Ye were busy cooking. The teacher sat there, the second teacher sat beside him, the third brother stood there, and Ye Fuxian naturally did not dare to sit down. "What do you see I'm doing, still sitting?" The old man glanced at everyone. "Yes, teacher." The three brothers nodded and took their seats, and the others sat down. "Teacher, when you left, the disciple received a personal tutor. You have also seen Fu Tian. Throughout his life, he was Fu Tian's friend. He helped chop the wood in the hut, and Lu Langxiu was Fu Tian's maid, taking care of daily life. Jiu Dongyu said. The old man nodded, and looked at Ye Fuxian and Lu Langxiu with a smile, and said, the boy will enjoy it. Teacher, Lu Langxiu was going to be a servant at first. I didn't want to agree, but when I heard that your father might return to the cottage at any time, I wanted to let him stay. If you always have something to tell you, you can let him do it. Ye Fuxian smiled. I know that I thought of the old man even before I had a teacher. I have a filial son. The old man looked at Ye Fuxian with a smile. Yes, the second and third sisters said that as a student of the cottage, respecting the teacher is the most important thing, and often told me to respect the teacher after seeing the teacher in the future. Ye Fuxian smiled, and the old man smiled. It looked so good, but how did those eyes make him feel like he was going through? It's very stressful. Fast. Luo Fan, who was cooking rice, looked at Ye Fuxian in admiration. This sentence, by the way, also shows appreciation for the second and third sisters. Yi Shaoxi sighed in his heart, still not learning his essence. Little Master is right. In the hut, except for Master Exinger, Little Master is always the most obedient, Sister Ershi said with a smile. It's better to be a second teacher. Ye Fuxian was touched. The old man nodded and said, the Eastern famine has not been so peaceful lately. Didn't the second girl tell you not to shoot outside? Teacher, I don't want to, but some people are embarrassed and have to take injections, and if we don't take injections, I'm afraid it's easier to hit the hut directly. What can I do if your parents don't care about this? It seems very sad, maybe only in front of the old man can see the side of the sister, Ye Fuxian thought to himself. The old man sighed, you try to do as little as possible. I know. Zhu Hui smiled and nodded. Teacher, the East Wasteland Bureau today, the Qing dynasty's ambition is expanding, and the ancestral tomb is opened. Now even the Donghua Zong, Fuyun Janzong, and Zuawangdian troops are invited to the tomb to train. How to deal with it? Jiu Dongyu asked. Before the teacher was not there, Kotang and Zhu Hui took the lead. He is an example. Now the teacher is back, and he naturally asks the teacher about something. In a place like Donghaning, I don't know what to strive for. The old man shook his head. Outside I heard that Liu Guo was destroyed. The descendants of Liu Guo and Fu Tian are good friends. They were the two little guys before. Right. Well, Feyang and Shenyu are my good friends, and they knew each other before entering the hut. Ye Fuxian nodded. The poor. The old man shook his head and said, the desire for power always blinds people's eyes. I have warned you before that you have a weapon to kill yourself, and you have more desires. You must remind yourself from time to time that the stronger, the more powerful you are. You have to stay true to your heart. Disciple understands. People nodded one after another, and the old man reminded them when they started, maybe this time mainly to tell Ye Fuxian. Especially Dongyu, your sharpness is too heavy. The old man said to the three disciples next to him, learn more from your master. Disciples often go to Dosheng Mountain to ask Lord Brothers for help this year. Jiu Dongyu nodded, but the disciples still think that when they face an army like the Qing dynasty, they can easily kill others because of their selfish desires. Let's stop killing. If it wasn't for your lack of cultivation, I would be afraid to go straight to the Qing dynasty. The old man looked at Jiu Dongyu and Jiu Dongyu did not speak. There is a lot of injustice in the world. He couldn't manage both. There is no contact that has nothing to do with them, but this incident happened around him, especially the grassroots disciples, and his mind was born naturally. Therefore, when the prince of the Qing dynasty, Qing Ji, dared to come to Shushan to invite people, he killed everyone from the Qing dynasty out of Shushan. This is the spirit. It is natural to kill and kill. It can't be said that there is something wrong with your thinking, but in fact the decision to destroy Liu Guo is still only a high-level figure of the Qing dynasty. One of the forces has differences people, for example, everyone in the Qing dynasty has a family member. If it was destroyed in the first place, it would be innocent and different from Liu Guo. The old man seemed to be a little serious, and said seriously, and continued, if one day your swordholder can kill the world, and every time you encounter injustice, you will kill it, and then you will have a lot of blood on your hands. What's more, you destroyed one Qing dynasty, and there will be a second Qing dynasty in the future. The world of spiritual practice will always be like this. Those who gain strength will have the will to stop killing, and will never change anything. So teachers often teach us that people speculate to change all these things, only the legislators can do that. Jiu Dongyu. I just came back here. If you don't talk about such a serious matter, is the fifth child immature? The old man shouted with a smile. Okay, teacher, you eat first. Luo Fan and Zuye sent food. Teacher, please eat more. Zhu Hui served the old man, and Bi Tang Exinger also served. Ye Fuxian heard some thoughts in the dialogue between the teacher and the three brothers. The Qin dynasty did this because the people who made the Qin dynasty rule did it. According to ancient records, 300 years ago, the Eastern Divine Land was a troubled world. After Emperor Donghang and Ye King ruled the world, the troubled world only receded. Wufu Academy was built in the world. His hometown, Qingzhou City, has a practice site in Qingzhou Palace of Learning. However, whether it was Qingzhou Zugong or Donghai Zugong, there were various lusts hidden within them, such as the ancient trees in Qingzhou Zugong and the Ziwei Palace in Donghai Zugong. However, the emperor is still a person who can influence the world. Today, the teacher set up a hut in the East Wasteland. There are only a few students. Maybe he wanted to create a different place. Chapter 366, The Rise of the Full Moon Sect. Luo Fan and Zhu Ye cooked a good meal, and they chatted while eating. Is the second girl aware of the sage? The old man asked at this point. Well, Zhu Hui nodded, but that move seems impossible. That step is very easy to take. The ancient books have clouds, wise people, know the world, contain all things, are open-minded, and are also known as Tao. Therefore, I often teach you that spiritual practice is also a spiritual cultivation, although the state of mind has nothing to do with circumstances, but it determines one's height. Although some people are not talented in terms of talent, they can still train to a very high level of mentality. On the other hand, if the mentality is not high enough, the talent is high and the upper limit destined. The old man said while he was eating, but Ye Fuxian and others listened intently. No wonder the Kotang brothers and sisters had great respect for that teacher. Although the teacher was not handsome, relaxed and simple, and even a little hesitant, when he spoke seriously, he really did look like a teacher. Master said before that the sage of the sage is not only the realm. If so, why do the bad people also get those words? Zhu Gehui asked seriously. Ye Fuxian had never seen the second teacher seriously. Looks like it's the first time. People with great evils are not always open-minded. Everyone holds fast to their own views and has their own pursuits. Even the evils you think may be wise in the eyes of others. For example, many people in this world believe that there are too many people, and the world has limited resources. They must belong to the strong. If you don't want to be a novice, you must be like an ant. Therefore, all beings do not need mercy, and the weak must be enslaved. The old man slowly said, are you right or wrong? Everyone thought about it, obviously thinking about the teacher's words. It seems simple, but very deep. Nature is wrong. Sister said, in the land of Divine Land, how many powerful forces, such as the Eastern Wilderness, occupy various resources for spiritual practice, and it is difficult for ordinary people to find even simple practice. Well, it might be a mediocre life. Not everyone in the world can meet a famous teacher. The disciples nodded one after another, agreeing with the second teacher's words. Ye Fuxian was even more touched. He walked out of Qingzhou City, a land of hundreds of countries. The people in Qingzhou City don't even know the prosperity and power of the outside world. Their vision and resources are too far apart. How to compare? It's no wonder that other people think this way. Second girl, it's rare for you to have such an idea. The old man looked at Zhu Hui with a smile. Then I ask again, with your words, I want the people of the world to enjoy the same resources, so why are you just sitting here in the thatched hut? Zhu Hui naturally understood the meaning of teacher, and he also knew that there was no absolute justice in the world. Whether it was a thatched hut, academy, or any power, the person chosen had to be an extraordinary one. In many cases, the birth of a person determines the beginning. Emperors and sages are all human. Who can understand this truth? Often people see matters from different angles, so I hope you don't go to any extremes. Open-minded people can see the world better. I don't have any. This method teaches the people of the world, so I chose a few of you. In the future, each of you can influence more people. For example, your master and brother created the Holy Sword Mountain as a kind of inheritance. Those who are talented and work hard is natural. It deserves to have more, but mediocre talent deserves the same attention. At least, no one can rob them of their right to work to change their fate. The old man slowly said, at that time, the Holy Land was in chaos. The weak like ants and the two emperors ruled the world, preached the world, and prospered the Wufu Academy. It was a relatively fair opportunity for the people of the whole world. Everyone in the world has the opportunity to work hard to change their destiny. Ye Fuxian seems to understand, and the truth is too great. The old man smiled and said, it's still far away, and you will feel further away from the Eastern Wasteland in the future. The third, fourth, and fifth, you guys are also talking about your cultivation. Was I lazy when I left? Teacher, my students are stupid. I stepped into the environment of the first-class prince not long ago. Jiu Dongyu said. Ye Fuxian looked at the three brothers with a speechless expression. The first-rate princes also admitted to being boring. Are you serious? At the beginning of the year, the three brothers challenged Lu Nanshan or the second prince. It seems that the battle made the territory of the three brothers better. The disciples are the fourth prince, Zhu Ye said. Teacher, I have also stepped into the middle prince country, although it is only the sixth. Luo Fan laughed. Teacher, I'm still at the next level, Bitang Exinger whispered. I'm in the sky. Yi Shaoxi scratched his head. The rest of my life stretches out in the sky on Tianshan Mountain. Ye Fuxian said with a smile. Should a teacher who is less than 20 years old be a genius, should the teacher praise him? You are almost 20 years old and you just entered the sky. The old man looked at Ye Fuxian exaggeratedly, with a look of disdain. Ye Fuxian blinked, and said, Teacher, it will be 20 years from now. It makes no difference, Exinger is younger than you and you are younger than you, and you don't know how to practice. The old man relentlessly cracked down. But you are lucky. Even though your talent is a bit useless, you met a teacher. There's still a chance. Ye Fuxian wanted to refute, but when he saw the second teacher and his sister smiled and looked at him, the third teacher's gaze was serious and suddenly angry. Brothers and sisters say, respect the teacher. Yet, he was insulted by his talent for training. Teacher, how are your parents doing? Ye Fuxian laughed and asked curiously again. I don't understand practice, the old man shook his head. Teacher, do you think the disciples will believe it? Ye Fuxian said. Tianshan, haven't you seen it? The bell that rings in Tianshan has an impact on me. The old man said again. Ye Fuxian was stunned, but he had not even thought about it before. The teacher said that makes sense. Is that, your parents are too strong? Ye Fuxian blinked. Do you look like that? The old man lowered his head and ate. Ye Fuxian was a little depressed. Did he make a mistake and the teacher really didn't understand the practice? Yi Shaoxi chuckled and smiled. Because Ye Fu went to the hut in the sky, his status plummeted. Now that the teacher is back, this person finally has to taste the taste and let him wonder. Although your cultivation is very low and your talent is rather poor, but don't be discouraged. I just finished eating and you followed me. I will give you some advice. Master and I treat mediocre disciples equally. Body dust. Ye Fuxian was a little confused. I haven't followed, said the old man, then left with both hands on his shoulders. Ye Fuxian scratched his head, glanced at his brothers, and saw that they were all looking at themselves, then stood up and followed. Oh, Yi Shaoxi smirked and finally burst out laughing. This person has today. I saw that everyone's eyes were on him. Yi Shaoxi felt that the atmosphere was strange. Seeing the strange eyes of all the brothers and sisters, he suddenly took a moment and then looked at Ye Fuxian. No, the teacher has just returned now, and he wants to teach his younger brother to practice. Yi Shaoxi muttered in depression. When was the teacher so diligent? You just reacted. Bitang Exinger looked at him. Yi Shaoxi remained completely. What happened? Little lion, how can you guess the teacher's mind? Zhu Hui said with a smile, and he naturally saw that Yi Shaoxi was gloating just now. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. At the end of the year, the month-end examination of the students at the end of the year was held again. At this time, Mizuki is very lively, many fairies are gathered together, all eyes are looking forward to the great battle in front of them, a very beautiful battle. The two sides of the battle were exquisite, and they were stunning women. They were actually princes of the Chu Chu Moon sect, and the people who fought him were not inferior in appearance or talent, but rather in Xiaoyuju training. Flower narrative. After returning from the land of the 100 nations, Vajayu has been training hard, and has made great progress, and has now entered the realm of heaven. I don't think there is any improvement in cultivation this year. What happened? Someone said, when Chuli had such strength last year, this year is still the case. Many people nodded silently, maybe because Chuli and keenly contacted this year, this practice was abandoned. Otherwise, even if he has extraordinary talent in interpreting language, he will not be able to do it for just 1 year. Caught. At this time, on the battlefield, a muffled sound came out, and the spell hit Chuzai's body. When Chuchi wanted to dodge, he was tied and bound by endless twigs and leaves, and his body was rigid in place. Previously, Hua Sheyu wore a crown, as dazzling as the queen, it was his life and soul, and his extraordinary spiritual power bloomed, which could affect his every attack. Fail. Chu Yan looked confused, looking at the beautiful woman in front of him, he lost to her. Hua Sheyu withdrew his spell and looked at Chu Yan. He didn't want to fight, he just wanted to train in peace. However, the last time Ye Fuxian came to see Wezong in trouble, he kept remembering that he didn't want Ye Fuxian to come. When looking for him, he also needed to see the other person's face. He was blocked outside the ancestral gate and refused to enter, so he had to fight. For a while there was silence around them, and they naturally understood what it meant for Chu to be defeated. Many people look in one direction. The ruler of the Moon King, the Moon Fairy, came to witness the battle in person. Wajayu takes the place of the Holy Virgin Chuyu, Fairy Wang Yu said. There is a commotion in the crowd, how long will it take to start? It replaced Chu Yan. At this time, a distant figure rushed to the side, and the Moon Fairy looked over there. Someone beside him asked, what happened? The voice fell, but the Moon Fairy looked into the distance, and there was a proud breath. Qing Dynasty, Qing Yu, came to visit Wezong. A voice spread far away. After a while, Qing Yu was seen coming with a dragon. He looked down at the elf looking for the moon. Don't blame the fairies. Chapter 367, Irony. Ye Wezong's figures looked up at the sky, their faces slightly changed. Qing Yu entered the dragon directly without any direction, and stood proudly in the air. This is very rude. In addition, the people who came were not only Qing Yu, but also a dragon, many strong men were there, and everyone in the Moon sect suddenly felt pressure. The Qing dynasty has always wanted to ask the Eastern Wasteland troops to jointly pursue the Hutt, and ordered Donghang to become the king of the Eastern Wasteland. A few months ago, the Qing dynasty held a big meeting. If the sage swords don't come, the Sword Alliance will. Today, it is said that Fuyun Janzong and Zhua Wangdian have completely moved closer to the Qing dynasty. In such a situation, Wang Wezong naturally wanted to be neutral, but now it seems that it is difficult to be neutral. As soon as Prince Qin arrives, please have a seat. Wangu Fairy's voice was gentle, her eyes were as calm as water, and she couldn't see the thoughts in her heart, but actually Wangu Fairy's heart also regretted that the three powers in the middle region of the Eastern Wasteland had already standing at the peak. Now the two powers merged and the Qin dynasty's ancestral grave was dug up. If the Qin dynasty had to deal with their Wangzong sect, there would be no tension at all. Liu Guo is a lesson learned. No need, come to disturb the fairy today, I will just say a few words. Qing Yu said lightly, bluntly refused, still standing in the void, facing Wang Wezong's people. Many of Wang Wezong's disciples were unhappy, and Maimo was a little cold, but no one dared to attack, worse than others. If it was a Hutt, the Qin dynasty would dare to do so. When Qin Ji led the strong Qin dynasty to go to the Hutt, and Jiu Dongyu were all cut off from Shushan. Sometimes many people will be jealous of the kindness of the thatched hut, ready to take revenge, even if it is their opponent. I am afraid to respect and hate the people of the thatched hut. Prince Qin, please, Mochizuki said weakly. Chu Yi. Qin Yu looked at Chu Yi who was still on the battle platform, looked cold, said, in Tianshan Mountain, Ye Fuxian killed my son Qin Li, you are my future wife, why stand there and watch? Chu Yan's face paled instantly, and now was the time to come. Many people saw Qin Lili in front of him. He was there, and Qin Yu's question could not explain it. Everyone in Wang Wezong looked at Chu Yan, and all the pressure immediately fell on Chu Yan. What does it mean not to speak? Qin Yu, the invisible power of oppression fell. I cannot explain it. Chu Yan looked at Qin Yu Dao. Qin Yu's expression is so cold that it is sufficient to explain nothing. I don't want to see son Qin Wang Wezong's death. I can understand the prince's feelings. However, it was Ye Fuxian that Qin Wang's son did. The Qin prince could come to him and get angry with a younger woman. It's a bit wrong, said Fairy Mochizuki. If it is an irrelevant person, of course I will not be angry. However, he is my fiancé, but standing up, and even Ye Fuxian has lost his fighting power and did not kill, I have to doubt it. Qin Yu said, although my son died, but the marriage contract is still there, Chu Ye is still my daughter-in-law from the Qin dynasty. I want to take her to the Qin dynasty. Does the fairy have an opinion? Wang Wezong's face has changed. Qin Li is dead. The marriage contract was naturally terminated. Qin Yu even took Chu Yi away. This clearly shows that I don't want to let Chu Yan go. If he really went to the Qin dynasty and didn't know what Chu Yan would experience, he would let Qin Yu handle it. Prince Kan's words, don't you think it's ridiculous? Mochizuki said, who is dead and the marriage contract still exists. That fairy means that my son died and died. There's no need to check the cause. What did his fiancé do and couldn't check? Qin Yuza breathed, and he stood on the dragon's head. His voice became more indifferent. There is an invisible faint coercion blooming from him, as if Wang Wezong did not satisfy him today, he will start directly. Wang Wezong's face is very unsightly. Chu Yunmei looks around. he knows that Wang Wezong can't save him. Ever since King Yu came here, it's finally apocalypse. Now, apart from the academies, who could compete against the Qin dynasty? I'm leaving, Chu Yan said suddenly. His eyes were a little bit of perseverance at this time, and he was relieved when he said this. This path was chosen by him, because it was a wrong path, he would have to pay for it. When he accepted King Li's pursuit at first, he naturally had his selfishness, and now he had to bear the consequences. After hearing Chu Yan's words, many people's eyes fell on him, only to see Chu Yan's face with a faint smile, as if he didn't really care. He looked at King Yu. I want to return to Qin with your dynasty, and King Li's death has not something to do with me. I couldn't kill Ye Fusion then. Of course, this is meaningless. I will go with you. After all, her body is empty. Mei Mei glanced at Hua Jiu below, her eyes were envious. The dragon headed forward and brought Chu Yan to the dragon's head. However, King Yu did not intend to leave, and the moon fairy looked at him and said, Prince Qin is still there. There is indeed another major event, which is also the main purpose of my trip. King Yu said. King Yu has always admired the name of the fairy, and this time I came to Wangzong, not only my own opinion but also with the wishes of his father, Donghazong and Fuyunjianzong. He invited the fairies to conquer the great cause of the East. He came to lead the strong, and Chu Chu's affairs naturally had to be settled, but how could he arrange such a battle just for Chu Chu? The person he wanted to kill was Ye Fusion, and the one he wanted to destroy was the hut. I have no such ambition. The Prince of Qin can return to the King of Qin and several kings, and disappoint them. Mochizuki's fairy voice was gentle. The hut is innocent and kills innocent people. In the hands of several princes from the Qin dynasty who killed the hut, the Eastern famine fell together. The elf is the master of the top forces in the Eastern wasteland. I can't sit and watch. King Yukon speaks, continued. The fairy can rest assured that in order to show the sincerity of the Qin dynasty, she is willing to marry Wang Wezong. Although my son King Li died, there are still many outstanding descendants, and Wang Wezong has now chosen a new saint. Just married my Qin dynasty, what is the fairy thinking? The eyes of the women of Wang Wezong all condensed. This is King Yu's true goal. To persuade Wang Wezong to choose. As for the wedding, it was even just a joke. They don't believe that King Yu won't know who the new girl is, and they want to take the Waji language. Of course, there is only one goal, to deal with Ye Fusion. It is not close to him, let alone a girlfriend, but also a disciple of the upper power of Wang Zongzong. King Yu's words are very rude and even embarrassing. He oppressed Wang Zong and wanted to start, and now it is not only the Qin dynasty that is oppressing Wang Zong, but the alliance of the four great powers. Good luck. Back off, die. Wang Wezong faced the same situation as Liu Guo at that time. The last time the Qin dynasty made excuses for Liu Guo, now it was more direct. The Qin dynasty's strength was stronger than it was in the beginning. In order to destroy the top two armies in a row, the Qin dynasty is really fierce. Hua Jiu's beauty eyes stared at the moon elf. She naturally couldn't go with King Yu. Fairy Mochizuki was silent for a moment, then looked at King Yu in the void, and said, the complaint between the Qin dynasty and the thatched hut, Wangzong doesn't want to participate in it. Waji language is my moon girl, and I will ask if they are married. Opinion, if nothing else for Prince Qin, please come back. This, rejected. In the vast space, Wang Wezong's disciples held their breath, and an invisible coercion enveloped the entire Wang Wezong. They naturally understood what Fairy Mochizuki's refusal meant, and the cost was most likely unbearable. Else sit to one side, but ignore the truth. King Yu asked indifferently, and then looked at the others, and asked, I believe that Wang Wezong's people are as unreasonable as the fairy Wang Yu, but someone wants to conspire with the Qin dynasty. Good cause. Many people trembled. Before the Qin dynasty destroyed the Liu kingdom, they separated many of the Liu kingdom's princes. It was said that the Liu kingdom was still the former rebellious Liu kingdom who helped the Qin dynasty. Today, King Yuming poses for Wang Wezong, asking if anyone wants to follow the Qin dynasty. This is to share Wang Wezong. Elder sister, Prince Kan's words make sense. At this time, someone said, he ran as Yan Fahong, the head of the Qianyu pavilion, and also the ruler of Chuyan. She has a very high level, but she is the sister of the moon elf. The moon fairy looked at Yan Fahong, and her eyes were a little cold. Yan Fahong's eyes flashed, and he did not dare to look into her eyes. Although she is a sister, she is very extraordinary, far superior to her, but a very persistent person. However, facing the Qin dynasty's oppression, Wang Wezong now has no other way to choose, he must consider for himself. Senior Yan's understanding of the truth is priceless. Wang Wezong is just a suzerain, is there anyone else? King Yu continued. Shut up. King Yu glanced at the void, glanced indifferently, said that his voice fell, and the whole void seemed to show a hint of coldness. The smile on King Yu's face stagnates, his gaze stares at the fairy looking at the moon below, with a dragon weapon in his hand, and spewing out a real dragon shadow, surrounding the tip of the gun. Fairy Mochizuki stood up. The clothes are windless and automatic. Even though he wasn't young, he looked like he was only around 30. There was a chill all over his body. She was a peerless beauty in the eastern wasteland, and she was still alone. King Yu, at the foot of Tianshan Mountain, in front of Zhuge Hui, the second disciple of the hut, how does it feel to whip a long whip if he is the family dog? Mochizuki Fairy laughed coldly. The person who killed your son King Li is Ye Fusion's thatched hut, afraid to go to an important person, come to me to watch Wezong Yobu Yangwei, so a rat, but also want to be the king of the east, don't you feel ashamed? If you want to fight, why not be polite, like a moon fairy, she is as clean as a fairy, but that doesn't mean she has no emotions. Chapter 368, Brother. Wang Yu's voice made the void silent and desolate. King Yu was there, and then there was a hint of slander in his eyes, killing Ling Ling. The people from the Wangu sect were also stunned. On weekdays, the delicate and beautiful suzerain broke out directly today and embarrassed King Yu, but the stone was really hard to swallow, and the Qing dynasty deceived people too much. It is the people of the eastern wasteland who don't know that this war belongs to the Qing dynasty and the thatched hut, but the Qing dynasty doesn't dare to start a war with the thatched hut to destroy Liu Guliwei, and now needs to involve them in the Wezong sect. An oppressive atmosphere enveloped the vast space. King Yu and Mochizuki looked at each other with cold eyes. In the direction of the Mochizuki tower, several figures were flickering. They came to the Mochizuki ferry. Gao, many of these people are moon fairy elders. I didn't expect the elves to be so strong. King Yu suddenly smiled, and smiled slightly. It's a pity that there are so many fairies. I want to ask again, who wants to follow my Qing dynasty? I'm sorry. King Yu's eyes swept across the crowd, many people moved. Yan Fahong blinked and said, I want to follow the Qing dynasty, Qianyu Pavilion. Disciple, who wants to follow me? His words fell, and several minions and many figures rose into the air. Master, Chu Yunmei looked at Yan Fahong, he was a little disappointed. Yan Fahong, Wang Wezong treats you well. An old woman said coldly. Uncle, the general trend, why is Wang Wezong against the general situation? It is better to persuade the sister and sister than the uncle, I can't bear their sister and younger generation. Yan Fahong said. It's good to see some people, Zongman will ignore him and even rebel against the enemy when he is in trouble. What's the point of staying in Zongman? Fairy Wangu didn't care, she spoke as she pleased, and she looked at everyone in Wangu. I am the suzerain of Mochizuki, and I never wanted to get involved in the strife in the eastern desert, but no one will let him go. Since you know you can't escape, why do you have to go this way? King Yu in the void broke through the terrifying light, Long Yin exploded into a circle, floating in the void. King Yu, don't think Dong Hung is the only smart one, others just underestimate this way. Since you want my Wezong to be involved in this war, then I will finish you off, Fairy Wangu said coldly. King Yu didn't say anything. Now the four forces of the Qing dynasty, Dong Hazong, Fuyun Janzong, and the Zuawangdian alliance, apart from the forces in the hut, he does not have much of a distraction. Because Wang Wezong disobeyed then disappeared. The dragon weapon swallowed the terrifying golden light, trying to penetrate the void, surrounded by the real dragon around its body, extremely majestic. Next to King Yu, Ling Tianjiani appeared, extremely sharp. Obviously, it wasn't just people from the Qing dynasty who came. Fuyun Janzong in the Hanging King Temple seemed to have chosen to escape by others, it's pitiful. Mochizuki said faintly, he recognized several people, including the three peak leaders of Fuyun Janzong and the main figures of the three palaces. Coupled with King Yu, who wields a dragon weapon, this power is far more powerful than what would crush Liu Guo. Obviously, King Liu will also suffer a bit from the Qing dynasty. If King Liu is not in first place, the Turtle Immortal and King Liu will not be able to win the Liu Kingdom on the spot. All of the Wangu sect disciples felt a bad moment. At this time, the fairy Wangu emptied her body, and behind her appeared a huge Zunpeng, covering the sky, like a doll. The moment Zunpeng appeared, a vast icy atmosphere was born in the vast space, and the water spirit in the heavens and earth turned into a huge rain. Suddenly, it rained heavily. This Peng Peng is the life and soul of the moon elf, and in its realm, the method of life and soul has long been overbearing and condensed into a true Peng Peng monster. Peng Peng was transformed by a fish into a Peng, with a very strong wind attribute and water power attribute. The moon fairy is a prince who is the prince of the prince, and realizes the meaning of a sage. Exingune Buyu was easy for him. There is also a meniscus behind the fairy looking for the moon, like an ancient mirror, illuminating the vast void. This is her second life and soul. Wangu Mirror. King Yu glanced in the direction of the far face, and merged with Wangu Zong's supreme Baoye mirror. Wangu Zong was named because of this. This mirror is a sage-level spiritual system. The history of the rise of each of the upper powers has a story. Liu Guo's appearance is due to the existence of the turtle fairy, and Wang Wezong's rise to become a top power is because of this magic weapon. Be careful, I'll deal with it. King Yu said, looking a little dignified. Moon fairies with moon viewing mirrors are a big threat. Even though he didn't shoot for a long time, his abilities were good for group battles. At this time, the temperament of the moon-seeking fairy is more extraordinary and more beautiful, like the goddess of ice and snow. Her icy eyes glanced at the vast void, and the crescent moon behind turned into a flash of light that flashed, raining between the heavens and the earth. Condensation into ice, extreme coldness came throughout the world. This world turned into a world of pale ice and snow. The dragons roared frantically, their huge bodies condensed into a freeze, their movements were restricted, and many strong men in the dragons felt that only their mental strength was frozen, then their bodies were slightly covered and turned into white ice sculptures. Frozen spells and spiritual attribute spells, snow and sorrow. King Yu's body released a sharp breath that was extremely sharp of gold and shattered everything. He sat with the dragon roaring and killing down. He himself wielded a dragon rifle to break through and kill him. He was surrounded by a real dragon, and his body was covered in snow and snow. The body rushed to the moon watching the fairy like golden lightning. Here only he and Mochizuki have the same level of character. The masters of Fuyun Janzong and the protectors of the Tenshin King Hall are weak, and there are no sage-level magic weapons to finish. Otherwise, even if the number of their strong players dominates, it is still a waste. If the peak combat power has an absolute advantage, it can sweep everything away. She is good at martial arts, and the fairy Mochizuki is a pure mage, and approaching the opponent naturally is the best way to fight. Zhang Peng rushed out, spread his wings and collided with the real dragon. The eyes of the moon-seeking fairy stared at King Yu, and the meniscus shining on the instrument hit King Yu. King Yu shivered, protecting his mental strength, and at the same time the enchanting magic armor appeared, and even if the frost spells came, they were still as strong as bamboo shoots, killing the moon-watching fairy. A pair of ice wings appeared behind the moon elf, like the wings of a penguin. A wind spell gathered on his body, and a terrifying tornado tore towards King Yu in the void. His own body flashed and appeared instantly. Above the sky, the speed was extraordinary. King Yu broke through the hurricane, glanced at the moon watching the fairy in the air, and sneered. The moon watching the fairy is a wind witch. He can't catch up, but if the moon watching the fairy avoids a frontal battle, everyone will have a stalemate. Boom! An extremely terrifying sharpness erupted, and a dazzling golden light fell, covering the vast and endless Moon sect. At this moment, the faces of the Moon sect all changed. No one here can stop King Yu except the Moon Elf. At this time, on another battlefield, a strong man in Zuawangdian went towards Wajayu under the sky. Wajayu's expression changed slightly. Wind spells wrapped around his body and fled. However, his opponent was the figure of a prince. The way to escape, catch directly and raise his hand as to catch. In the distance, suddenly a bright light exploded, and the void seemed to tremble, and the straight light was too fast, like a real lightning. With a click, the body of the prince who took Hua Sheiyu's body was split into two, and the extremely bright light stopped, still above Hua Sheiyu's head, making a very sharp sound, a frightening mood from there. It is a knife. Seeing that someone came to the Waji language, the sword intent turned into lightning again. The cricket sound continued to spread, the blood bloomed in the void, and the prince character was easily killed like a cricket. Then the sword went towards King Yu's body, a dragon weapon stabbed from King Yu's hand, golden lightning pierced the void and directly pierced the sword, but his face was very unsightly and could have such a sword intent. People, there is only one eastern wasteland. Gaze turned his head and looked into the distance. I saw there, a black figure stepped forward. The speed did not look fast, but he came here in a few steps. After the black figure appeared, his eyes fell on Wajayu. Wajayu didn't know what was going on yet. It seemed that the man in black saved himself, but who was he? Why so arrogant? His appearance stopped the battle in midair suddenly, seemed sudden, and seemed very natural. Brother and sister are doing well. The black figure smiled and nodded at Hua Jayu, and Hua Jayu blinked, brother or sister. His eyes moved, and he quickly guessed the identity of the man in black, called his brother and sister. naturally because of the man's relationship, this is a Grass Church disciple. There was only one Kotang who was good at making swords. Thinking of the smile in Hua Sheyu's eyes, he didn't expect his brother to come. Hua Jeyu has seen the predecessor of the Sword Saint. Hua Jeyu was slightly surprised. Sword Saint, this is a legend in the Eastern Wasteland. Senior. Dao Sheng shook his head with a smile. You can follow my sister and call me my master. Huh? Hua Jeyu nodded slightly, then shouted, brother. Okay. Dao Sheng nodded slightly, then looked at the moon elf. Mochizuki's body floated in the air. Looking at Dao Sheng, it seems you are right. Even though the teacher is lazy, the student's affairs should be managed naturally. Dao Sheng said weakly. After the Tianshan bell rang, the people of all the major forces retreated from Tianshan. Then the teacher found him and asked him to come. Journey to the moon sect. In fact, he had lived under the mountain for months, and the moon elf had also met him. Wang Wezong doesn't want to get involved in this storm, of course he won't force it, but just stay under the mountain. Chapter 369, Qianzong. Strong people like Qin Yu saw Dao Sheng's appearance very embarrassed. This time they launched 4 powerful forces, which had already overestimated Wang Wezong's strength. But what they didn't expect was that the Taoist was in Mizuki. Although the number of strong people appearing in Dao Sheng was still domineering, however, the peak combat power determined everything. As long as one of the Dao Sheng and Mochizuki fairy dragged Qin Yu, who could stop the other? With only a sword, Dao Sheng beheaded several princes. Fairy Wenyu said she doesn't want to get involved in this battle. She has already formed an alliance with Kotang, Qin Yu said coldly. Wangu Fairy glanced at him indifferently. Dao Sheng came to Wang Wezong and they talked once. He accidentally got involved in the storm. He hoped that Wang Wezong could be neutral, but Dao Sheng didn't look good. He thought that the Qin dynasty would come, like a sword. As the holy place guest, the Qin dynasty came. Even if he did not make concessions, he had to choose, otherwise he would die. Therefore, only war ended. Their safety is entrusted to you. Fairy Wangu glanced at the sky, and then the moon soul shot the moon glory and reflected on Qin Yu's body. Qin Yu's body suddenly turned into an independent space. The cold was intense, cold to the bone marrow. The sorrow, snow and ice spells were released again, this time no longer a group attack, but only targeting Qin Yu. Qin Yu only felt that his mental strength should freeze, and his perception and movement became extremely slow. The ice on his body gradually invaded and he wanted to cover his body. The golden brilliance blossomed, the body seemed to turn into a golden body, like a war god, the infinite golden brilliance penetrated everything, and all the dragons were born, roaring in the world of ice and snow, destroying the power of ice. Fairy Mochizuki stretched out his hand, he closed his eyes, and the whole world seemed very slow. Oh, an extraordinary storm was born, and an endless storm enveloped the space around him and Qin Yu. If you look down from the void, you can see a terrible vortex, and the body of the moon elf is integrated into it. In the storm, it revolves around Qin Yu's body, almost overwhelming. Qin Yulong had a gun in his hand and was waiting for him. She was a strong martial arts practitioner with aggressive attacks, but Fairy Mochizuki was a pure mage and didn't fight her at all. This terrible storm is spinning wildly. Qin Yu only feels that his body is also rotating with this space, and he can't see the outside world. The people from the Moon sect stared at the storm in the void. Storms could destroy everything and tear the entire sect door apart, but at this moment they swung and rolled into the void to escape the battlefield of the Moon sect. I am afraid that Qin Yu's crazy battle will spread to Wang Wezong's disciples, just like Qin Yu's main combat figures. If he couldn't stop killing, he could only take him away from the battlefield. As for Wang Wezong, he left it to Dao Sheng, who clearly believed in the power of Dao Sheng, rather than confidence. He believed that Dao Sheng could better protect Dao Shengshan's disciples, so he took Qin Yu away from the battlefield. Dao Sheng raised his head, glanced at the void, and then the sword was full of the sky. From him, countless swords were born and went in different directions. Gradually, the space seemed to be cut by an invisible sword. Kill. An icy voice escaped Dao Sheng's mouth, and the voice fell. The sword lump turned into a lightning sword beam, which emptied the void. With a dragon roar, the sword was cut, and the dragon's body was split open, sending out a miserable misery. Growl. There was a powerful prince who resisted with a spell, but the sword seemed to be in a non-existent state, and the sound of crickets was constantly coming out. Above the void, there are constant numbers being cut by the sword, and there is no strength to resist. At this point, there was a spell and Zhang Wang broke through the air to kill the sword sage, and at the same time killed the people under the moon sect. Stand on the ground and don't move. Sword Saint saw Wang Wezong's hand and opened his mouth. His body was lifted into the air. His hand seemed to be holding a knife in his hand, and he swept across the void. His body was the center, spreading in all directions, and in an instant, a parallel enchantment from the blade appeared in the parallel space where he was standing. Endless spells and sword lights exploded, all in enchantment. Shattered in pieces. At this moment, I saw a sword light descending like lightning. This sword light drowned out everything, as if cutting through the void and headed straight for the sword master's body. It was shot out by several Peak Fuyun sect experts. Dao Sheng looked up and did not move his body. A sword that could cut through the void fell and crashed into him, but he saw an extremely terrifying sword coursing through Dao Sheng's body. Light, like a huge armor, Ling Tianjian fell from the sky, but couldn't even break the defense. The gap between the half-step sage world and the Peak Prince was much bigger than expected. Back off. Fang Yun Janzong said, they know that even if there are stronger ones, Sword Saint alone is enough, and Sword Saint also wants to protect Wang Wezong's people. Each figure swiftly retreated and headed towards the sky. I warned you last time in the Qin Palace. If you don't listen, leave them all. Dao Sheng said aloud, and the sharp enchantment of the sword surrounding his body turned into endless blade light. Heading into the void, Dogang broke through, chasing those fleeing. Quick! Some people shouted, but they were faster, the sword was faster, voided in the void, the barrier spell collapsed, and many people showed despair, observing the sword earnestly, passing through the body, facing the sword light fused with the meaning of the sage, they have no resistance at all. Only big figures, such as the peak leader Fuyun Janzong, are worthy to be able to block Daoi's attack, but at this moment, Dosheng's body seems to be transformed into Dogang. The speed is faster than Daoi faster, his right hand is stretched out, and a dazzling blade of light appears. No, people saw Dao Sheng's body kill him, and he made a terrifying sound, but Dao Sheng didn't rush at him at all, just walked past him, and a bright sword intent split his body instantly in two. Not only him, the people who fled in the void are the same. Dao Sheng's body rubs against each other, and the blood is constantly blooming in the void. The strong person with the Chu body is embarrassed and just wants to kill Chu. But when the sword light came, he cut the dragon he was riding on and then fell on him. Chu Zun's body fell with his broken dragon body. The beautiful eyes stared at the saint's sword that passed through it and continued to rise upwards. There was a gleam of admiration in his heart. The sword is in his hand. Wang Auru, how brave the ants are. He thought he would die today, but did not expect to be saved, and the person who saved him was Ye Fusion's brother. Of course, he also understood that Dao Sheng did not come for him, but because of the woman Ye Fusion liked, because of Waji Yu he was in Wezong. Above the sky, an extremely bright blade light bloomed, accompanied by a sound of fear of mercy. Chu Yan let his body fall, staring at the scene in the sky, and didn't know how it felt in his heart. In the sky, Wang Wezong's people also saw a bright knife light in the sky, as if they wanted to cut through the sky, and they had boundless desire in their hearts. Is this peak combat power? One person can destroy a powerful legion. Yan Fahong. A cold voice came out, and then caught a glimpse of a figure, heading towards Yan Fahong's body. Dao Sheng did not kill Yan Fahong. This is Wang Wezong's internal problem, and Wang Wezong will solve it. Yan Fahong's face paled instantly. He looked at the angry crowd around him and said, I'm also thinking about Moyuki, what's wrong? He's the ruler, he knows the sword is there, why not tell us? I know that too. An old uncle said, in the past, I saw a sage sword with a suzerain. He speculated that the Qin dynasty might treat Wang Wezong and asked Wang Wezong's opinion. Disputes, wise saints, truth, respect Wang Zong's choice, but stay on the Feet Mountain without leaving, just to guard against the Qin dynasty. If the Qin dynasty does not come, it should have happened before, and if it is further known, into the ears of the Qin dynasty, I still want to get involved. You don't need to talk nonsense with him, take notes and wait for master to come back and let go. People said. Yan Fahong was pale. At this moment in the sky, after the swordsman finished his stature, the figure continued to rise and head for another battlefield. In the air, he met the moon fairy. King Yu was not there. He ran away, maybe because he knew that once you freed the hand, it was dangerous, so there was no love at all, Mochizuki said. Dao Sheng nodded gently. King Yu also has a sage weapon, and there are more than one. It was impossible for Mochizuki to hold it in. Thank you very much. After all, Fairy Wangu thanked her, the cottage and Wangu Zong had nothing to do with it. No need, now the Qin dynasty has united with the main army to prepare the hut, and help you in the hut. Dao Sheng said, and the two said they returned to Mizuki. However, Wang Wezong is not safe next time. Dao Sheng said. The moon-seeking fairy naturally understood that. She glanced at the green peak, and then smiled bitterly. Since the Qing dynasty forced Wang Wezong to make a choice, what else can I say? Is there a vacant place in Shushan? Welcome, Dao Sheng smiled and nodded. The person who looked at the moon and looked down at the sky said, everyone has witnessed what happened today, and there is no need for me to say anything. Wangu is no longer safe. I plan to temporarily move the gate to Shushan. If anyone wants, I don't want to go if I don't want to get involved in this storm, and those who are willing to pack up and get ready to leave. The disciples of the Wangu sect were in an uproar, but they also understood that the sovereign was powerless, and they had no other choice at all. If it wasn't for the sword, they would have gone to the Qing dynasty or been destroyed. Chapter 370, Daughter-in-Law. Book Hill, Thatched Hut. On the misty ancient peak, on the green grass, a handsome figure sat quietly, with many books beside him. At that time the figure was watching quietly. On a rock not far behind him, an old man lay there quietly, holding a wine gourd in his hand, taking a sip from time to time, looking very pleasant. The two are Ye Fuxian and his teacher Mr. Du. After reading the books, Ye Fuxian closed his eyes, and suddenly the world around him resonated with the aura, the wind whizzed, the heavens and the earth were killed, accompanied by a sharp sound. The space is like there is a wind blade, and they are intertwined in a chaotic and rolled towards the front. The space in front of them seemed to be drawn into it. What was even more amazing was that these sweeping wind blades gradually gathered at one point. It turned into a straight line. Hum. A loud sound came out, and a small hillside in the distance separated directly from the middle of the gap. This gap is very narrow, like a line, difficult to see with the naked eye. Wind spells were as sharp as swords. Ye Fuxian's eyes opened, then he took another book and looked at it. Teacher, sister, it's time for dinner. A voice came from far away. Ye Fuxian put down the book, and when he turned around, he saw Bi Tang Exinger carrying a lunch box to the side. The old man on the rock sat down and smiled. 6 girls, what did the 5th child make today? Master, see for yourself. Bi Tang Exinger jumped on the rock to open the lunch box, and then took out the food. The smell was immediately fragrant. Ye Fuxian stood up and came to the side with a few mouths. Who made you stop? The old man glanced at Ye Fuxian and said lazily. Teacher's time is short, and I'm hungry. Ye Fuxian grieved. Also, the spell is almost complete. Oh, Exinger, go back to your book pit and choose a spell for your master to train. The old man groaned. Still studying. Ye Fuxian said bitterly, Teacher, most of these spells are of average strength. They are not very effective, and they are not difficult to learn. What Xiaomo child knows is spiritual practice, can see clearly, and is called reading books hundreds of times, so you will dare to call magic useless for many kinds of spells. If you are not good at the 3000 dharmas, how can you say that you are a disciple of such a church? Master Du said lightly, but the movement in his hand had already started. You will spend your time with your spiritual practice. You know that your brothers and sisters are jealous. Master, the disciples are willing to give the brothers and sisters a chance. Ye Fuxian cried, 3000 ways, killing him. This old man doesn't want to practice all the spells in the book pit, right? Be personal. Revenge is definitely revenge. Where is this? You are the eldest. I've taught your brothers and sisters. Don't be biased. Teachers are people of principle. The old man said cautiously. It doesn't matter, the disciples don't mind. Ye Fuxian said. Okay, son, you will accompany the old man to copy books in the future. Your 4 masters are skilled in many spells after copying. It seems to be very effective, the old man said casually. My teacher is wrong, I will practice the spell. Ye Fuxian was crying. Bi Tang Exinger laughed, youthful and beautiful. She looked at Ye Fuxian with her beautiful eyes. Brother, come and eat, the food is cold. Now, thank you, Sister Exinger. Ye Fuxian was touched, and the 2 sisters were kind to themselves. Sister Xiao, don't complain, but the 2nd and 3rd brothers hope that the teacher can teach them more. Bi Tang Exinger gave Ye Fuxian Shengfen a grin and said, practice all kinds of spells before you can get past them. Master has all the talents. Naturally, if they wanted to use their abilities, they could do whatever they wanted, spells could be sent as they wished, and thoughts could move. Listen, look, you are not very young, and you don't know how to practice before. Exinger is younger than you and understands you better. It is a piece of rotten wood. Fortunately, I met my parents. Ye Fuxian was very depressed, he also said that he was still a child now. I repeat what the teacher taught me, Bi Tang Exinger said. Hey, Ye Fuxian sighed, and met his uncle. Teacher. Another figure came from a distance. Ye Shaoxi also came here, and saw Ye Fuxian and the teacher eating together. He looked at Ye Fuxian with envy, and the fat man had no status. What's with the fat? The old man asked. Cough. Ye Fuxian coughed and glanced at Ye Shaoxi. This nickname shouldn't be too sweet. Ye Shaoxi looked at Ye Fuxian fiercely, but he was also brought into the hut when he was young. At that time, the teacher called him fat. What can he do? Is fat wrong? Teacher, Fairy Wangu is leading the disciples from the Wangu sect and wants to meet that teacher, Ye Shaoxi said. Is your master back with you? The old man asked. No, my brother must be prepared to return to the sacred mountain. Ye Shaoxi said. Now that the situation in Eastern famine had reached such a point, the sacred sword mountain was no longer safe. Naturally, everyone should concentrate on the mountain. Undoubtedly the safest place. There are lodges and colleges here. In the eastern wasteland, the only place in the Qin dynasty that did not dare to move was Shushan, otherwise it would have been attacked a long time ago. Obviously there is no absolute certainty. In addition, Ye Fuxian's eyes shone. Did the moon-seeking fairy lead Wezong's disciples to Shushan? There seems to be something really going on there. Master still has foresight. I am afraid that the Qin dynasty is paying a small price this time. When Wang Wezong arrived, Siyu naturally arrived. I'm full, my teacher will go and see. Ye Fuxian flew out of his body. Are you done with your training? The old man shouted. Teacher, what are you saying? Ye Fuxian replied. The figure was already far away. Demo, do not you say that you cannot practice, come to catch up. The color of the teacher is heavy and light, why did the third child accept me as such an apprentice? The old man was depressed. That, Shaoxi should think of it this way, Ye Shaoxi added jealously. Yes, fat, you can train with him. The old man said to his heart's content. Ye Shaoxi immediately shut up. Let go of your second teacher, I'll talk to my brother. The old man said something and then turned to leave. Ye Shaoxi nodded and came back. At the entrance of Shushan, the large square is filled with all kinds of fairies and beauties, blocking the entrance of Shushan, and many of them are stunning women. This could make the academy's students extremely revel in, and the mountains of the academy would know how many students had come and stood here to be admired. So many beautiful people. It is said that the fairy Wang Wezong will train on Shushan in the future. It seems so, and I don't know if the dean will agree. Agreed, of course agreed. I still have plenty of open space on the mountain, which can accommodate a lot of fairies. So is my mountain. The entrance to the academy became very lively, and many animals were drooling. The image in front of them shouldn't be too beautiful and dazzling. There are far more male students than female students in the academy, let alone beautiful ones, it is heaven. This is my first time seeing Fairy Mochizuki. It really is a fairy character. Clear and clean, and doesn't eat human fireworks. That's Chuyu, the girl from the moon sect, one of the three beauties in the eastern wasteland. There's too much beauty in there, who is it? Someone cast their gaze in one direction, not far behind Fairy Mochizuki, a woman who was around 19 years old, even more beautiful than Chuyan in a few minutes. Her face was stunningly flawless, and her skin was as beautiful as jade. Yes, who is the fairy from Moon sect? Why have you never heard of it before? And the face is better than Chu. Many people argued that Tang Ye, an academy student, was among the crowd. Naturally, he knew who the woman was, and he said, she is a flower translator. Hua Jiu really appeared in the eastern wasteland, and naturally not many people knew her, so even though her face was stunning, her popularity was not high. Flower narrative. Many people muttered, then remembered one person, Ye Fuxian's girlfriend, Hua Jiu. It seems hopeless. At this time, a figure came to the side, and it was Ye Fuxian who was so impressive that he landed on the ground and felt a little dazzled. Ye Fuxian has seen the fairy Wang Wezong. Ye Futian bowed before the fairy Wang Yu who was standing in front. Juan heard the name Kotang Ye Fuxian, and he really has an extraordinary temper. Mochizuki said with a smile, he was telling the truth, and each of the Kotang disciples was shocked. Ye Fuxian was less than 20 years old, and he was already a starving person. Keen without his death, his future would definitely be brilliant. That elf is too famous. Ye Fuxian scratched his head, like a shy boy, and said quietly, I came to see my wife. Father-in-law. The fairy wings flashed, then smiled and looked back at Hua Jiu, only to see Hua Jiu's face turned red instantly, saw many sisters around her smiling at her, and suddenly looked at Ye Fuxian fiercely, can't anyone has the slow self-esteem. Ye Fuxian stepped forward, stepped into the fairy, came to Hua Jiu, and laughed, Shiyu, I really miss you. Hey, it's time we weren't around. Fairy Yinru, who knew Ye Fuxian, smiled. Elven brother, I will be a family in the future. Ye Fusion smiled and looked at each other. Suddenly, many fairies cheated on him. Ye Fusion stretched out his hand, took Hua Sheiyu's little hand, and Hua Sheiyu hid symbolically. Then he let him pull. There was another loud noise. Animal. Many disciples in the academy saw blood dripping from this scene, this beast. At this time, there were several figures that appeared. It was their Zhu Hui. Zhu Hui glanced at Ye Fusion and showed a smile. This guy is really rude.